You're listening to the Happy Doc Student Podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing clarity to the often mysterious doctoral process. Do you feel like you're losing your mind? Let me and my guests show you how to put more joy in your journey and graduate with your sanity, health, and relationships intact. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Frederick, and today I'm doing something just a little bit different. A few weeks ago, I finished interviewing my 100th guest and thought it would be a good time to pause and reflect on the last few years. I figured everyone loves a story, so sit back, relax, and let me tell you one about this podcast and how it changed my life, and in doing so, share some actions you can take today that just might change yours. Once upon a time, the world experienced a global pandemic and everything changed. One girl, if you can call her a girl, she was just shy of 50, took lockdown and being confined to her home with her partner and teenage twins as an opportunity to seriously take stock of the path she was on and ask herself if her dreams didn't need just a bit of spit shining. She had just spent over 2 decades with doctoral students and faculty, and while the daily work wasn't sparking joy like it used to, she was still deeply passionate about helping people realize their dreams of becoming a doctor. In the early morning hours, while it was still dark and the rest of the house was asleep, she would sneak out of bed and sit in meditation and think about her life. Basically, she was asking herself what she wanted to be when she grew up. One morning, the idea of starting a podcast popped into her head. Because she had never even listened to one, she just tucked this idea away and readied herself for the daily chaos of virtual school and work. But, and you know how this goes, the next thing you know, friends were sharing links to interesting podcasts, and ads were appearing in her Facebook feed for podcast launch schools. So what may have been just a fleeting thought, just a glimpse of an idea, began to grow legs, and within days she saw a clear path to how she could actually do this. The podcast would be a mechanism to reach more students, and this idea sparked joy. And because she had never done anything like this before, it would double as a fun challenge. And this was when she realized she was maybe just a bit bored with her life as it was. It was as if the pandemic had stripped away distractions, leaving her to realize that she had begun to settle for the mundane, the mediocre, and this just wasn't her. During the first year of the podcast, she released a show every single week. But then life happened, and she found herself in what Dr. Anna Yusum in episode 16 calls the dark night of the soul. Maybe you're having one of these seasons at this very moment, but if you aren't, chances are you have, and you can relate, or you will, because life in a human body is just like that. The Reader's Digest version of events that led to this trying time goes something like this. The dissolving of her significant relationship, selling a home in suburbia, buying a home in a very rural area on a dirt road with no mail service, taking a new job, twins graduating and boomeranging from high school to Alaska and then back again, and then leaving that not-so-new job. Now, all of these significant events were experienced against the backdrop of the global pandemic and its aftermath, as well as the devastating loss of 2 aunts and her father. When things got really hectic, in order to stay aligned with her core values, she moved from publishing an episode every week to every other week, but never once missed publishing on her timeline. See, the Happy Doc Student Podcast was her escape to a happy place. Once a week, she would put a sign on the door that read, "Do not disturb." and either hang out with an interesting person or relive fascinating interviews through the editing process. She got so much joy chatting with people from everything about scholarly writing to meditation. She thought starting a podcast would be fun, but what surprised her was that every single episode gifted her with something: a new thought, a new skill, a new paradigm, even a new friend. One day, she got an alert in her inbox. She was approaching her 100th episode, and the idea came that she would record a show showcasing her 5 favorites. So she dutifully sat down with a list. You can get this list at expandyourhappy.com, and quickly realized she couldn't pick just 5. So she figured she'd expand it to 10, but then became paralyzed by the task because there was something she loved about every single show. So she pivoted and decided to distill themes that emerged from the wisdom shared by the guests and record an episode sharing practical things that emerged from these themes. Things a listener, whether a doc student or not, could do right now to experience a more joyful journey. Okay, so obviously the girl in this story is me. And because I'm going to be getting personal here, and because it feels just a bit awkward to stay in that third-person storytelling voice, I'm going to shift and tell you that I actually found it quite difficult to come up with the themes and practical tips for a short podcast. Reflecting on my first 100 guests, even if I reduced their messages to common themes, I could easily come up with 20, and maybe I'll share more soon. But I like to keep these podcasts under about 30 minutes, so I'm going to give you 4 powerful themes that helped me get through the last few years and find joy, sometimes in places that I least expected it. Theme number 1, and if you've been a longtime listener, you're not going to be surprised, is that self-care is non-negotiable, and yes, you do have time. You all hear me say a lot that self-care practices expand time and are the foundation for positive feelings like sustainable happiness. Now, it's true that when it felt like my entire world was crumbling around me, my goal wasn't happiness. It was keeping my sanity. Really, I was just trying to not totally lose it. When I reflect on some of my most difficult days, I see myself being tossed in a pretty angry ocean. I was drowning in sadness, anxiety, and overwhelm. I was cold. I was wet. And at times, solid ground seemed so very far away. And self-care became my life vest. My morning routine reminded me I was alive. It gave me hope. When I started each day by caring for myself, I was better able to process these uncomfortable emotions I was experiencing and hold on to the belief that better days were ahead. In fact, the knowing that everything was going to be okay wavered only when I neglected my self-care, which I did at times because, well, I'm human. But every week when I worked on the podcast, I was reminded of things like, you can't control all situations, but you can control how you respond to them. And if you're like me, you respond so much better when you've been taking care of yourself. In essence, this podcast was like a flashlight as I traveled through this dark period. My guests helped me take action and prioritize self-care, starting with my morning routine. But it was you, listeners, who inspired me. My podcast platform tells me how many episodes are downloaded each and every day. And every week, I get emails from you all sharing how the podcast has positively impacted your life. If you weren't out there listening, I wouldn't be doing this. And if I wasn't doing this, I truly don't know what the last few years would have looked like for me. So thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being there and for listening. Okay, so back to my self-care routine. During the really rough times, these were times when I wasn't feeling like me. I was constantly short-tempered and just generally cranky. This was when I decided to spend 2 hours each morning because that's what it took to just get myself in the right headspace so that I could face the day. I also took many 5 to 10 minute breaks during the day, doing things like chanting, breathing, humming, stretching, maybe just talking or texting with a friend. I ended most days with a short walk and reading or journaling, getting to bed early so I could get a restorative night's sleep. I was just so tired. I've never been so tired in my life. All told, during my bleakest days, I would guess I was spending probably about 3 to 4 hours every day just trying to keep myself sane. And I know this sounds impossible, but time expanded. It was almost as if the more time I spent taking care of myself, not only did I feel better, but I got stuff done. And as I sit here recording this, I'm wondering if maybe that was the universe blessing my choice to put taking care of me first, but whatever it was very, very cool. Now, at this point, having passed through many of the rough patches, I spend just about an hour each morning with the same effect. Again, life just happens so much more smoothly when I experience it from a relaxed state. Now, if you still don't have a daily self-care practice, and it certainly doesn't have to be something that's an hour each morning, even 10 minutes is going to change your life. Episode 3 walks you through step-by-step how to start one, and I'm going to link to that in the show notes. But I have so many episodes about different types of practices that instead of linking them all below, I'm going to suggest you download that list from expandyourhappy.com and then listen to the ones that resonate with you. Practically, the name of the game is to start small and find something that really just works for you. My morning routine is flexible, but always includes a gratitude practice, meditation, and yoga. By the way, yoga with Adriene is my favorite, followed by a visualization of where I want my day to go. I also pay attention to what I'm consuming and use supplements to support my body and my mind. Now, what I take in terms of supplements really varies from day to day, but there is a specific product that I want to share with you. For the last 8 months, I have been consistently using Magic Mind, and they tag themselves as the world's first productivity drink. This was actually a product that discovered me shortly after my father was diagnosed with cancer. I love it when just what you need appears at just the right time, and this is one of those synchronistic moments. The company reached out to me with the idea that their little green drink would be perfect for my audience, and it was exactly what I needed at the time, but I wanted to use it for quite a long period before I felt confident sharing it with you. So if you're looking for a product that's backed by science and will not just decrease feelings of overwhelm, but increase focus, creativity, energy, and motivation, these were all things that I was lacking seriously during my dark days, then I encourage you to check out Magic Mind because in my experience, it really is like magic. And I'm still using this product today because of the benefits I reap. In fact, I'm so impressed with what I've experienced that I've paired up with them, and Happy Doc listeners can get a super sweet deal if you use the link in the show notes and code HDS20 when you order. That link will also take you to the website where you can learn all the details about what's in this little green drink and how it works. Anyway, this was truly such a game changer for me that I had to give it some airtime. Okay, so to sum up theme number 1, dear listeners, take care of yourself. On to theme number 2. There is joy to be found in exploring new and different ways of thinking. I'm not exaggerating when I say I end every interview with a new understanding a new way to view a topic, situation, or even the world. Whether it was cold showers, creating a synthesis matrix, intermittent fasting, learning about hypercompetency, or reframing how I think about the imposter syndrome or how to take feedback, my guests often prompt me to think differently, and this has led to experiencing more joy. The people with the most impact during this season of my life gave me a new way of thinking about something very specific: technology. Rob Kraychek and Daniel C. from episodes 89 and 92 encouraged me to develop a philosophy around technology and make significant changes in how I interact with my devices and social media. I got clear about how I want to use technology in my life. I was reminded of my vision to help you all finish. And really, how can you do that if I'm prompting you to engage in social media, which truly is probably the last place you should be? When I did a deep dive, I noticed that being on social media wasn't totally aligned with my core values, and that's probably why it just didn't feel right. So I did 3 things, and these are things you may want to consider doing. First, I deleted all social media apps from my phone. Yep, you heard that right. Second, I deleted all social media accounts, but Facebook and LinkedIn. Facebook, because I do genuinely connect with family and friends via this medium, and I appreciate the way it acts like a journal recording some of my life's milestones. So I kept that one. And I kept LinkedIn because LinkedIn does not have the addictive qualities the other platforms do, and because that is where you all tend to hang out. Now, these 2 actions immediately gave me not only a ton of space back into my day, it also, somewhat surprisingly, reduced a lot of these yucky feelings I was experiencing daily, feeling pressure to post, wondering what I was missing, getting stressed by a post that I read, and things like that. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to follow my lead and basically break up with social media, but I'm suggesting that you go deep and examine your relationship with social media and how it may be impacting you, both your well-being and your degree completion. The third thing I did, and this was huge, I claimed an honest day of rest each week. Now, I'm going to be super candid here and tell you this took a ton of trial and error, and I still haven't totally nailed it. But in general, I take from sunset Saturday to sunset Sunday as my personal Sabbath. This means my computer is off and behind a closed door, and I don't do anything that feels like work. And by work, I mean things I do for pay or chores that I don't enjoy. Also, my phone goes on Do Not Disturb, and I would love to completely turn off my phone, but with kids and aging family members, this hasn't been possible. I'm actually considering buying myself a burner phone so I can leave my quote-unquote smartphone in a drawer. This has really been an interesting experiment for me. I basically had to train myself and my network, but the impact on my well-being has been undeniable. And if you're feeling called to claim a day of rest, click on the link to Daniel C.'s book in the show notes. Okay, to sum up theme number 2, exploring new and different ways of thinking can help you discover more joy in your journey. And if you haven't already challenged yourself to think differently about technology and specifically social media, I encourage you to do that and do that soon. Now, these changes that I made around how I invite technology into my life also positively impacted my productivity, which brings me to theme number 3. Productivity is a choice. Where you're going to be productive and how productive you're going to be is in your hands. Let's start with where you're going to be productive. There were days where I was not actively working on my podcast or my day job. For example, I took unpaid FMLA during the last weeks of my dad's life because I chose to make memories over accomplishing other goals. These were choices I consciously made that were in line with my values, and I'm sure you can relate. When you're not working on your degree, you're working on something else, right? We're always working towards something. And this is such an important point. If you're not making progress towards your degree, is it because you're being productive somewhere else? And if that somewhere else is in line with your core values, like taking care of yourself or an ill relative, then cut yourself some slack. But if that somewhere else isn't in line with your core values, like logging in a marathon session of Netflix or slipping into a TikTok rabbit hole, then maybe it's time to regroup and pivot where you're being productive. Next, how productive you are is also a choice. And I want to share 2 super simple things that are key to my personal productivity. First, having boundaries and the courage to say no to some things so that you can say yes to what's really important to you at that moment in time. I learned so much from interviewing Allison Miller in episode 71, and I'm so grateful for her suggestion on how to gracefully say no. It's a simple sentence I use when someone offers me an opportunity or asks me to do something that takes time away from wherever my focus currently is, whether that's on my podcast, taking a road trip with my kids, or spending time with a family member. The template goes something like this. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm committed to fill in the blank, so I'm not fill in the blank. All right, here's an example. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm committed to my podcast right now, so I'm not taking on any new projects. Or, thank you for thinking of me, but currently I'm committed to spending time with my family, so I'm not attending any extra events. It's one simple sentence, and it works. Now, in addition to finding my voice and saying no without apology or excessive excuses, the second thing I do is keep a schedule. But not just any schedule, one that starts with a good night's sleep and a morning routine, and one that leverages my most productive hours. Do you know when you're the most productive, and does your schedule reflect that knowledge? I know that I am best in the morning, so I schedule my cognitively heavy tasks and meetings then, and that one action has made me so much more productive. Now, if you think about it, keeping a schedule and having the courage to create and maintain boundaries really are expressions of self-care. Okay, I know I'm getting a bit repetitive here, but take care of yourself and boost your productivity by saying no to things that are not top priority, and stop right now, today. Today, make a schedule that includes a morning routine, even just 5 or 10 minutes, and leverages your naturally productive times. So to sum up theme number 3, productivity is a choice, and where you are going to be productive and how productive you are going to be is in your hands. Last, but certainly not least, the 4th and final theme that I'm going to share with you today is this. Curiosity makes life way more interesting. Fostering curiosity is one of my favorite topics, and I'll put some links down below to some of my favorite episodes on this topic. But in short, these past few years have been full of challenges for me. And when one popped up, when I reacted by getting stressed or angry, I could feel the joy literally leave my being. But if instead I paused, took a deep breath, and got curious, something incredible would happen. When I asked questions like, isn't this interesting? Or, I wonder what I might be learning here. It completely and totally changed how I experienced the event. Being curious changes everything. Everything. Really, if you get nothing else from this episode, but the idea to pause and ask, isn't this interesting? Or I wonder what I might be learning here. The next time something happens that triggers you, then I will consider this episode an absolute success. So to sum up theme number 4, get curious and life will be so much more interesting. Okay, I usually end each show asking the guest if they have a favorite quote they'd like to share or some final words of wisdom. And today I'm going to give you 3 statements that have become my daily mantras. These are things I have written on my bathroom mirror. They appear as screensavers and are things I whisper to myself constantly. I hope at least one resonates with you. First, in the end, it will be okay. If it's not okay, it's not the end. This is probably my favorite, so I'm going to say it again. In the end, it will be okay. If it's not okay, it's not the end. Second, energy goes where attention flows. And I want to ask you, when was the last time you really considered, where is my attention going and why? Or asking yourself, is this where I want my energy right now? Energy goes where attention flows. And finally, own your impact. I am here to make a difference in my sphere of influence, and so are you. Own your impact. So there you have it, my reflections after interviewing 100 amazing people, distilled into 4 themes that have carried me through. Take care of yourself. Think different. Remember that productivity is a choice, and get curious. Thanks so much for listening. And if you would like to support this podcast, you can do that in so many ways. Here are just a few. Sharing an episode or 2 with a friend, reading and reviewing the Happy Doc Student Handbook, rating the podcast, wearing Happy Doc Student swag, purchasing Magic Mind. Don't forget to use code HDS20 to get that sweet deal, treating me to a green tea that will keep me going, or sending me an email at info@expandyourhappy.com and sharing how the podcast has helped you. Until next time, here's to more joy in your journey. The Happy Doc Student Podcast is brought to you by expandyourhappy.com, and you can learn more there. Hey, one more thing. Just a quick reminder that the information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only.